Good evening, everybody. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Hope you guys have had a good day so far. Can you hear my music? Merry Christmas. Can you hear the music in the background? Okay, good. Well, for anybody who doesn't know, this is going to be our Christmas edition. If you couldn't tell. Oh. Guys, we're just a few days away from Christmas. We are a week away from Christmas already. I just can't wrap my head around where all this time has gone for this year. It's flown by so far, like crazy. Miss Janice, hello. Thank you for joining us this evening. So for anyone who has just stumbled onto this live, we are doing a book reading this evening. It's a series, and so we're actually book 4 of 5 in the series. So if you would like to stick around and just kind of let me fill the space of silence with some sultry sounds of my voice, feel free to hang out with us. If you get super duper lost about where we're reading and who we're talking about and where we are, you can actually find my previous readings of this book and the books prior in the series on my YouTube channel. So for all of you guys who are seeing this right now on TikTok Live, you guys know what's up. But if you are seeing this on YouTube, if you would like to, like if you don't follow us, if you don't follow me on TikTok as it is right now, we do these book readings live every Monday. So it's great that you guys are watching from YouTube if by the time you see this recording, but it'd be great to have you guys like with me, like as I'm reading. That would be great too. So if you ever get the inclination to follow along when we're doing our book readings, it's every Monday, 8 to 9 or 8 to 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. So just to keep that in mind. But for all of our newbies, we usually wait until about 8:05 to start reading, just to give people a chance to log on, to get into their, comfy clothes, to grab their favorite drink, to get just kind of settled in for the hour. So right now we're actually reading Wolfcry by Amelia Atwater Rhodes. And for anyone who's following along, we are currently going to be starting on chapter 10. So there's, I would give a synopsis of what has happened so far, but there is so much, and I don't even think I could Reader's Digest my way through an explanation of this story. But I will say, if you guys are looking to get back into reading, let's say you're not a big reader, or you just don't have time or whatever, and you're looking for an easy read to get back into reading, a series like this is a really great way to start, because as you can see, these books are not that, like, if you look at the density of your finger, it's the same. These are not big books, and they're all, more or less, all 5 of these books are about this size. So, it's not like you're reading thousands of pages per book. No foreign well, technically that's not true. There is a foreign language in this book. It doesn't, I don't want to say gibberish, but it's definitely not, if you don't know how to read it, it's fine. It doesn't take away from the storyline itself. It doesn't take away from the character developments, nothing like that. So it's Still a very easy read, even though there is a foreign language in this book. And just this story in general, in this universe, I suppose, I guess is how you would call it. So, but, yeah, I hope you, is anyone who celebrates Christmas, because I know not everybody does, but is everybody ready? It's getting down to the wire if you're not ready. I'm not ready. I'll be ready hopefully by Thursday. I'll be ready. So, we got our Christmas lights outside. We have our tree up, but it's kind of decorated. But yeah, like I have a whole bunch of baking and stuff to do later this week. I still have a Secret Santa gift I have to go get. So, hi, Miss Deborah. All you have to do is wrap presents. I gave up the wrapping thing years ago. I have decided that I am a bagger. I am very much a pro decorative bag person. And that seems to have worked out in my favor so far. It has that has really worked out for me. And you know, no one's complained yet, but if you're a beautiful gift wrapper, good for you. I'm not one of those people. My mother's one of those people. The meticulous, like, crisp lines and beautiful little bows, and you feel guilty about tearing into them, into the presents, but, you know, that's what the paper's for. But I'm definitely a gift bag person, and I have made my peace with that. So, bags are good. If it's nothing too big, and if it's not a really weird shape, I will wrap it. It's just not as aesthetically pleasing as I would have wanted it to be, but that's why I like the bags. It can kind of look rustic, and it's, you know, you can get away with it. So, all right. I've got a few more minutes left, so we'll play a little bit of Christmas music. Christmas music. Damn it. Except there's a commercial. We're not playing commercials here. There we go. One day I'm gonna get YouTube Premium and get no commercials and no ads, but I'm cheap, so I'm just not gonna bother. All right. Hello, Chris. Thank you for joining us this evening. Oh my goodness. We don't play Christmas music at work, where I work, because we're not allowed to. So I must admit, like, not being inundated 24/7 with Christmas music makes me actually want to listen to Christmas music when I get home, or Christmassy kind of themed stuff. I'm very much on a jazz kick these days. Like, I'm listening to a lot of jazz lately. So the Christmas jazz is actually really nice, like really, really nice. So, all right, it is 8:05, my babies. Let's get started with our reading. So, as I said, if anyone who is following along, we well, yeah, hopefully, yeah, that's part of the reason why I put the book readings on YouTube, Miss Deborah, is just in case you missed something, you can always rewind it and go back and listen again. But yeah, that does come in handy. It's the same thing with, so like, I don't know if anyone noticed, I'm wearing a, do not lose that page, Bob Ross sweater. No, his hair doesn't show up. Anyway, I'm wearing a Bob Ross sweater. And I love the fact that all of his stuff is on YouTube now, because his voice is so soothing to me that I struggle to stay awake through those episodes, which is I hate that because I want to watch how he paints pictures and stuff, but every time I fall asleep. So YouTube has been a godsend, because I can just go back and be like, oh wait, I fell asleep at this part. Let me watch this piece again. So I'm glad you're making use of it on YouTube, Miss Deborah. So for anyone who's reading with us, we're on chapter 10, page 71. We're going to read for about an hour because I'm trying to get some baking done after this. So here we go. I was exhausted from my travels, even more tired by how carefully I had tried to watch my words with Velio, and worried I had accentuated Kalisa's troubles by revealing her possible vulnerability. I was relieved when Velio offered to escort me back to my room because I would be able to rest. The doorway was covered by heavy furs, and Velio brushed them aside, allowing me to slip through the narrow opening. Someone had built the fire up before we arrived, so the room was warm despite the winter chill outside. Velio followed me inside, and then, as if just deciding, said, "I think I'll join you." "Excuse me?" Had he been Serpient, accustomed to sleeping innocently among friends, I might have assumed that his offer was platonic, but as far as I was aware, the wolves did not share that particular custom. He walked toward me, his stride graceful and soundless. I said, "I think I'll join you. It's a cold night." I took a step back, but the room was small, and I only succeeded in hitting the backs of my knees on a trunk that sat at the foot of the bed. "I'm sorry if I somehow gave the wrong impression, but—" He caught my hand and kissed the back of it. "You are half Serpient, are you not?" Insulted, I fought the urge to deliver an equally offensive and thus hardly politic reply. Instead, I used his own logic against him. "I am also half avian." He shrugged. "You are also a guest in my camp. I thought you would be grateful." "I am grateful," I answered, trying unsuccessfully to take my hand back. "However, I also—" He stepped forward despite my protest, trapping me against the trunk. "You also?" "Let go of me." "Relax," he whispered. "I am not interested," I said bluntly, feeling my heart trapped in my throat. "Now kindly release me." I caught his wrist when he reached for me with his other hand, which made him chuckle a little. "Princess." He yanked his hand back as he tugged on my wrist, so I ended up stumbling and falling against his chest. "I'm not sure you appreciate your position. There are many women who would be jealous of—" "I'm not one of them," I growled. The last of my respect for him had disappeared, and with it my trust that he wouldn't force this. I said, "Let go." When he didn't, I twisted, driving an elbow into his stomach as I attempted to hop over the trunk and back into the center of the room. His grip loosened for a moment, but he didn't quite release me. Instead, he twisted my arm behind my back so that I fell, barely avoiding hitting my head against the corner of the trunk when my knees struck the ground. Before I recovered, he pulled me to my feet and then shoved me toward the mound of blankets piled on the bed. Furious and frightened at the same time, I managed to lash out once more, striking him in the chest with the heel of my boot. He doubled over, spitting out a string of curses in his own language that I never wanted to have translated. I hurried back into the cold night before he could follow. I would just have to hope that I was well enough to get by. I couldn't risk staying at the mercy of Velio Frectane. One or the other of us wasn't likely to survive it. "Eliza?" I hesitated when I heard Prattle's voice. "I have to leave," I said quickly. "Thank you for your hospitality, and please thank Jenna." He glanced toward the cabin I had just fled, and winced. Then he drew a knife, and for a moment I thought he meant to stop me. Instead, he offered it to me, handle first. "Just to help you hunt on your way. Don't use it on him." He looked again toward the doorway as I took the weapon. "Go. I'll try to delay him if he comes after you." "Thank you," I whispered. "You should not travel long alone," Prattle warned. "You are not well." "I don't think I have a choice." He nodded for the moment concerned more with removing myself from Frictane land than with choosing a destination. Only after I was back in the woods did shape-shifting occur to me, and then I remembered that I did not have my wings. 3 weeks to Wyvern's Court, Prattle had said. It would be more than 3 weeks if I had to travel alone without supplies through unfamiliar land. I knew that Wyvern's Court had to be south from here, but I had never made such a trek by myself. I tried desperately to take my wyvern form, but again felt only a queasy rolling in my stomach. Desperate to reassure myself, I reached for my cobra form and found nothing. Nothing. The poison lingers. Dear Sky, I hope it won't linger forever. I knew that a similar poison was used by the Dancers Guild when a punishment required someone to be held in one form for some time, but that it wore off in a few days at most. I hoped this would be the same. I had lost my avian form. I could not lose my cobra, too. Had the lions stolen the poison while in Wyvern's Court, I wondered? Or had their employer given it to them? They might even have had it already. South, Eliza, my scattered wits reminded me. You don't have the information you need to find answers, and you don't have any more information until you get home. Your people need you. You've no choice but to walk, so walk. My fury at Velio and at my situation in general kept me warm, and I made good time as I jogged and walked south through the night. It was nearly sunrise when I grudgingly accepted that I needed to sleep. I wished I could make a fire, but my hands were shaking and I could barely keep my eyes open. The idea of searching for dry wood and struggling to make a spark was overwhelming. Fortunately, this night was not as bitter as the one before, and I was able to find shelter in a warm nook where a pine had been knocked down across a boulder. I curled up inside, my stomach rumbling. I would need to figure out how to find food and make a fire later, but for now, sleep. I woke near noon to find a furry gray-brown ball at the entrance to my little den. It lifted its muzzle and licked me when I blinked at it in confusion. "Morning, Betia," I greeted with a smile of relief. "Thank you for finding me and guarding my rest." The wolf yawned, stretched, shook herself, and let out a little bark. Then she plodded to a large deer that she had obviously taken down earlier and saved for me. "Thank you," I said. "And thank you too, Prattle, for the knife," I thought as I clumsily butchered the deer. The tree I had slept under provided dry wood, so I managed to cook as much of the meat as we could consume right then. Betia watched me with an intelligence and patience that said she knew what I was doing. I spoke to her as I worked, and while she didn't respond, I had a feeling she understood much of what I said too. "I can understand why you ran away," I confided when we began to walk again. The afternoon was bitter, but at least it wasn't snowing. I couldn't stand Velio either. Betia growled beside me, and I laughed a little. I think that's a good way to put it. She growled again, and as I turned, I realized she was looking into the trees. I did not have a wolf's sense of smell or hearing, but I could hear something. Something unfriendly by the sound of Betia's growling. Someone shouted deeper in the woods, and I recognized the voice of one of the lions. I looked at Betia, my heart racing, and then we ran, slipping through the trees, stumbling over drowned logs and brush. In their lion forms, my hunters were much faster than I was. I wished again that I could shift. We were going to be overtaken, and I didn't stand a chance with just my knife against the claws of a pride of lions. Even if Betia helped me, she was only one, and I knew there were at least half a dozen of them. "Oliza!" Tavisen's voice floated through the trees. "Stop running!" He had broken a bone in my wing, clipped my feathers, drugged and poisoned me. I wasn't anxious to talk about it. Suddenly, Betia and I were tumbling down a bank I had not noticed. Betia let out a yelp, and then I was back on flat ground, the air knocked out of my lungs. The wolf nosed my ribcage, encouraging me to get back up. Bracing myself on her shoulders, I dragged myself up again. Luckily, our pursuers were delayed by the drop-off. Maybe they weren't being paid enough to risk broken necks, but who would have hired them to go this far? They knew who I was. What payment could possibly make it worthwhile for them to risk both the Serpient and Avian armies coming after them? I didn't know how long Beatty and I had run, using stream banks to obscure our footsteps and distort our scent. sleeping for only a few minutes at a time before my pounding heart woke me again. 2 sunrises. 3 sunrises. The world began to waver under me, and finally I forced myself to slow our pace. I did not know how near the lions were, but I knew I couldn't go on that way. With someone after us, I knew better than to go due south, as I had planned. Betia and I varied our direction. I followed mostly as she led us to streams with fish, rabbit burrows, brooks with fresh water, and sheltered spots where sleep was easy to find. Evenings, I lay awake in whatever hollow we had chosen for a bed that night, shivering from chills caused by more than the winter air. I kept food in my stomach through sheer force of will, fighting the twists in my gut because I knew I needed the energy the food provided. I needed my strength. I needed to make it home. Chapter 11. Hello, anyone who has just joined us. Welcome, welcome. I didn't know how long we'd been traveling, a fortnight maybe, when the day turned black without warning. I fell to my knees and heard Betia's frantic bark. Despite my best efforts, when I tried to push myself up, I couldn't find the strength. I was dizzy and sick from poisons and too many days of running. Betia whimpered and nuzzled my shoulder, but my abused body had had enough. My stomach cramped as a bout of heavy coughing made me curl into a little ball on the cold ground. I coughed until I gagged, and even afterward I couldn't keep my body from shaking. The wolf was running in desperate circles around me, barking every now and then to encourage me. She disappeared, and I was overwhelmed by another coughing fit. I had to stand up. We had to keep moving. I had pushed myself to my knees by the time Betia returned, her coat dripping wet and her brown eyes apologetic. She must have run back to the river to try to bring me something to eat. I lifted a hand and put it on her shoulder. She licked fever sweat from my cheek, and I closed my eyes. I was on the ground again, and I was sick, and I was cold, and I was lost, and I was frightened. Betia was frightened too, and I wanted to say something to comfort her, but I could think of nothing. What was happening in my home while I was lying here? What had happened with the dancers? With the Vahamil? For all I knew, I might return to a war. Suddenly hands were on my shoulders, and someone was lifting me into a sitting position. For an instant I thought the mercenaries had found me, but I couldn't summon terror. I felt only protected. Gentle fingers brushed my cheek, and then someone was holding up a cup of cold, sweet water to my lips. I realized then how tight and raw my throat was from coughing. I tried to stand again, but strong arms held me still. When I shivered, they held me more tightly. Night fell, and those arms kept me warm in the darkness. When I woke, I was offered more water. As if by magic, a fire had appeared. When I woke again, sometime after sunrise, it was to the scent of cooking meat. I ate a little, though my appetite was still poor, and drank more water. Then I slept once again. It was another day before the fever broke, and I opened my eyes and finally looked with clear vision upon the woman who had cared for me. Her thick hair was light brown with darker, ruddy shades. Her skin was tanned, and her arms and face had streaks of dirt. Her eyes were a familiar warm brown with dark, heavy lashes. "Good morning, Betia," I said. She looked at me and yawned and stretched, just as she had the first morning. She did not speak aloud, and I didn't know if she even remembered how. Speech was one thing that most shapeshifters who went feral never recovered. Still, that she had been able to recall her human body was a good sign. Her concern for me and her need for a form more suited to caring for me must have driven her back from her wolf. She put a hand to my brow to check my fever. "You keep taking care of me," I remarked as she turned to tend the last flickers of the fire with easy skill. Betia glanced back at me and tilted her head the way a natural wolf would have when puzzled. I wondered what thoughts were passing behind those earthen eyes. She smiled and then returned to the rabbit she had set to cook over the low-burning embers. Had she caught it before she'd returned to human form, or was she still an excellent huntress even without a wolf's speed, strength, or ferocity? Of course she was, I decided. The Frectane tribe belonged only to those who could care of themselves and their pack, and Velio would never have been interested in a weak woman with nothing to offer him. The thought gave me a chill that had nothing to do with my illness. I realized for the first time that Betia was dressed in simple pants made from soft wool and a loose blouse of the same material, with fluffy sleeves and an airy fit. Her feet were bare and her hair was down around her face in tangled waves. Dressed like that, she had probably been alone in her own room, relaxing, or perhaps preparing to sleep, before she had taken her wolf form and run from her people. Alone, or with someone she had trusted. By the next day, we had started moving again, more slowly this time. Each day took us farther south, though we kept an ear out for signs of pursuit. If I had worried about Betia's ability to travel in human form, I had been wrong to. Not even bare feet seemed to bother her, though I was glad we were no longer in the snow. She ran ahead occasionally, slipping through the trees like a sprite, but always returning before returning peaceful solitude turned into loneliness. I saw my reflection in a pool where we stopped for water, and I grimaced. I was beyond lean, thin, dangerously so. The drugs should have worn off weeks before, but I hadn't had enough food or rest, and my body simply didn't have the resources to fight the poison. I could still feel it in my blood, and with every step, I knew that I risked bringing the fever back. I simply didn't have any choice. I was lucky to have Betia with me. She had a knack for finding drinking water, as well as caches of nuts hidden by squirrels. She also could tickle fish from the streams, seeming not to care about water or mud, and I had not forgotten that she had somehow caught that rabbit, alone and unarmed. I still did not know what had possessed her to follow me, or to save me in the first place. I wondered if it was doing her a disservice by taking her with me. She obviously did not want to return to the Frictane, but was Wyvern's Court, in its state of distrust and turmoil, really a place where she could be happy? More and more I wished I could join her in the forest, as serene and natural as she seemed to be. "Your brother, Prattle, was the one who told me your name," I said to her in the midst of one of our many one-sided conversations. He cares for you a great deal, it seems." She tensed beside me, her step faltering, and did not even look my way. "Your mother also seems to be a kind woman." I described the odd morning when I had met both Prattle and Jinna, not moving on to discuss the rest of the day. I knew that Betia didn't want to hear anything about the leaders of her pack. "They must love you," I mused aloud, thinking of my own loved ones. My parents, not to mention the rest of my family and most of the court, would be frantic with worry over my disappearance. Everyone would be, except whoever had paid to have me removed. "I know you were hurt, and you're frightened, but couldn't you still go back?" Betia shot me a look that clearly said, "Do not speak of that." "Betia?" She dropped her gaze for an instant, then looked at me with a plea in her eyes, reaching out to touch my arm. "I didn't mean to upset you," I said. "I was just thinking about the people from my home, who I love and who I miss, and who must be so frightened for me. If you never want to return to the Frictane, that is your choice. If you want to come to Wyvern's Court, you can have a new life there. Or if you want to be with other wolves, Khaleesa's pack would probably take you in. Unless, of course, Khaleesa was no longer in charge of the Vahamil when I returned. Khaleesa, injured. The dancers demanding answers. Wyvern's Court, torn by violence. And me, wandering around in the endless woods. I let out a frustrated cry, and Betia leaned against my side and put her arms around me. The mercenaries never should have been able to take me from Wyvern's Court. They never should have been able to take me through forests patrolled by my guards and occupied by the Vahamil. They never should have wanted to. Who could convince the lions to risk the wrath of a realm such as Wyvern's Court? We were a peaceful nation, but we had warred for many years. The death toll on both sides showed just how skillful my people had been at killing each other. It would take a lot to force Wyvern's Court to turn back to war, but kidnapping the heir to both thrones was a good start. Or was that the point? Someone wanted me not just removed, but transported a great distance. Someone had gone to great trouble and great expense to meet that goal. Someone was behind me. I froze, then moved only my arm to reach toward my knife. Why hadn't I heard them approach? Betia snarled and bush branches snapped as she pounced. I spun toward the interlopers, raising the knife, evading one attack. Serpient. At least 3 of them in my immediate view. The real criminals? No time to wonder, my mind snapped. Defend yourself first. Beatty and I moved back to back as if we had rehearsed it. 3 on my side, I said aloud, though I didn't expect a response from her. A quick glance revealed another 2 on hers. The serpient in front of me had the palest blonde hair I had ever seen, and light blue-green eyes. 2 against 5. Not good odds, especially since the serpents wore 2 knives crossed on their backs, and 3 of them were also armed with strong wooden stabs, tipped with blades that gleamed wickedly in the sunlight. 1 wore a bow in addition to this. Drop the knife, the man in front of me said. I didn't have a choice, really. If these were the people who had me abducted in the first place, they wanted me alive, and dropping the knife would be the better option. Before I could act, Betia snarled and someone behind me cried out. Seizing the moment of surprise, I leaped for a man holding a staff. I knew how to use it. I hit him in the gut, knocking us both to the ground, and reached for the weapon with my free hand. We rolled and I came up with the staff, which I tried to snap down across my enemy's head. He blocked, rolling enough to deflect most of the blow, then came up with a snarl. White scales coated his skin, and his eyes became pure blue except for slit pupils. Snake eyes in his fighting form. I wished I could summon my own, with its increased speed, flexibility, and reflexes, as well as enough poison to make any enemy hesitate. I rolled away, swinging the staff. I felt it strike one of the other attackers across the ribs. Someone pounced on me from behind. An arm wrapped around my throat, and I turned the knife in my hand to drive it backward. I felt it hit something, but then my wrist was grabbed and the knife was wrenched from my hand. An elbow to my attacker got me dislodged and tossed into an inelegant heap on the ground, nearly at the feet of a woman. She gripped the front of my shirt, then froze and let out a piercing whistle. Startled, she half hissed, half shouted, "Peace! Weapons down!" There was an oomph as someone behind me was hit, and the woman said to me, "Call off your friend." She stood, dropping her staff. "I didn't realize who you were." "Betia, stop!" They had us outnumbered and outarmed. There was no reason for them to let us go unless the woman was being honest. Looking around, I saw that we had done a surprising amount of damage, but I had no doubt that we would have lost eventually. Betia was still in her human form, thank the sky. If she had returned to her wolf to fight, I would have worried that she might not come back again. The woman who had pinned me offered me a hand, saying "Fmitmil varnasera." Shocked, I took a moment to translate the words. "You bless us, dancer." My hand went to the coin at my neck, the anlay my mother had passed on to me, and I gave the traditional reply, "From Varnasera henna, blessed be." Chapter 12. For anybody who has just joined us, welcome, welcome. Book reading is part of a series. You've missed a lot, probably. You can go back to my YouTube channel. You can find the link on my bio and either watch the first few readings of this book, watch the first other books in the series that I've read already. But if you want, stay with us, hang out, and listen to me read for probably another half an hour or so. Chapter 12. My heart was still pounding, even though the fight was over. I had been formally greeted as a traveling dancer, based on an archaic law that almost no one remembered these days. "I apologize," my former opponent said. "Normally we do not tolerate strangers in our lands, but anyone with a snake charm is welcome here, and safe, as in days before. I am sorry I did not see it sooner." "And my friend?" I asked. "She is not a dancer." "If she is your friend, she is ours." I brushed myself off and went to Betia's side, unchallenged. I had not known that there were any place left that still honored such old traditions. but as it seemed to be working in my favor, I would not argue. "Betia, are you all right?" I asked. A man knelt beside us. "She's bleeding," he said. "Come, let us care for her wounds. Yours as well, Dancer. And our own," he added wryly. I realized he was the one whose skull I had tried to knock in with the staff. "You fight well, especially considering that you look half-starved and exhausted. We will see to your injuries, then you will eat and rest here." Their generosity forced me to be honest. I am being hunted, and I am not really a dancer. I have learned some from Wyvern's Nest, but I am not even officially apprenticed. He smiled anyway. "Someone thought you worthy of wearing the anlay, so you are welcome. As for your hunters," the smile changed to a hungry one, "you are among the Obsidian tribe. We have more than steel to keep you safe, if need be." "Are you the leader here?" I asked tentatively. Perhaps I was not so safe. The Obsidian Guild was a group of outlaws. The nearly colorless hair and eyes of some, if not their ivory scales, should have told me. White vipers, Maeve's descendants. They had lived as outsiders since their ancestors had been driven away for practicing dark magic that endangered the Serpient. They had defied Cobriana rule for millennia, occasionally joined by other serpents who had either chosen to leave Serpient society or had been exiled for crimes. "Perhaps," he answered with a teasing smile. "Perhaps not. You are looking at me as if I have sprouted wings, though for you that might not be strange." He tickled the back of my neck, ruffling the feathers there and making me jump. His expression turned serious. "I know who you are, Oliza Charde Cobriana, Princess of Wyvern's Court. I recognized you as soon as I saw you, but you still wear the charm. That grants you safety, a meal, and a bed, no matter whose blood you carry or who travels with you." My whole body sagged with fatigue and relief. "Thank you. Your generosity will not be ignored." He laughed. "Oh, ignore it, please. We've no desire to join your court. Certainly no desire to come to the attention of your parents. You may stay as long as you like and leave whenever you like. But once you are gone, I hope you will forget us entirely. Now, please, join us for supper. Fmitil and Tfjarning, Dancer and Wolf." Our wounds were tended, as were those we had delivered. No one seemed to hold a grudge about the injuries, though Betia delivered more than one amused look my way. She sat beside me while we ate. Although they were friendly, no one introduced herself or himself by name. I noticed that the names they used for each other shifted from one moment to the next. "So tell us, Dancer, you said you're not even apprenticed. But you would not be wearing a snake charm if you did not know something," one said as the night wore on. "I cannot officially be apprenticed to the nest because of my position in Wyvern's Court," I answered. People nodded. It seemed everyone here knew who I was. "However, I have learned as much as my nest's leader will teach me." "What steps do you know?" I sighed, considering. "Blade dances are my favorites," I answered, "but I love everything. I know about 15 of the Sakri and most of the Sheda. Of course I have learned the Namirda, though I have never performed it, and I know the 4 Harja types and 6 of the 13 formal Melos variations, though I have never danced them outside of my teacher's class either." "How old are you?" someone asked bluntly. 20. I knew what the next question would be. It's my own choice not to perform the Rashtoth dances. The Rashtoth dances included the Melos and the Harja, as well as certain pieces such as the Namirda. That reminded me of Urban's teasing offer to dance with me at Salem's reception. I wished my last memories of him could have been that light. The man I had first spoken to, a white viper I suspected was the leader despite his refusal to admit it, said firmly, "Then we'll respect that choice. Though if tomorrow you are feeling well enough, perhaps we might see something you enjoy." Dinner ended when I was just reaching the sleepy haze that follows an excellent meal. Betia and I were offered a bed in one of the few shelters. It was a beautiful night for sleeping outside, but our host pointed out that it would be best if Betia and I were not seen by anyone who passed by, namely the mercenaries who had been following us. I spoke to Betia as we drifted into sleep, about dances, about the beautiful Melos, and about how I wished I could dance those steps without all the hassle that came with them. I told her of the Anlay and how it had come to me, and then of the history of the Obsidian Guild, from the genesis of the Serpient to the modern-day position of Maeve's kin. Betia leaned against me, snuggling closer, and I took it as encouragement to continue. The White Vipers have never acknowledged a Cobriana as their king, I finished. Some of my ancestors have tried to force them, and some have tried to make peace with them, but the guild stays as it has always been, a group of drifters. The White Vipers are the heart of that guild, though sometimes other serpents join them. I did not explain that these were usually former soldiers who'd been branded traitors for refusing to fight during war times. Criminals who were no longer accepted by their own families and friends also went into the woods sometimes. Supposedly, justice among the guild was harsh enough that these criminals were forced to reform, or else were kicked out of their last possible haven. Betia yawned beside me, and soon we both fell asleep. I felt safe and warm for the first time since I had found Urban unconscious on the cold cobbles of the northern hills. Chapter 13. Welcome to everyone who has joined us. Hope you stick around even though you may not know what's going on. The Obsidian Guild implored me to stay for a few days to recover my strength before traveling, and as eager as I was to get back to Wyvern's Court, I knew they were right. Betia bounced back to perfect health like a puppy, and soon she was laughing and occasionally humming a melody I did not know. Though she remained in human form, she still had a tendency to pounce like a young wolf at play, sending us tumbling across the soft ground until we were covered in dirt and leaves, but laughing too hard to stand up. Despite the horror that had led to the situation, and despite my fears of what I would find when I reached home, I was thankful to have this time. I had never had a friend who was completely unaffected by my status in Wyvern's Court. It was nice to be a person instead of a title. As a result of the good food, the chance to sleep well, and the healthy exercise, gradually I started to feel like myself again. The nightmares that had plagued me did not completely disappear, but I was able to shake them off during the day. My serpent form returned to me, which left me both relieved and heartsick. I could not imagine returning to Wyvern's Court without my wings. I could not imagine facing pity from the avians, or horror from those who would now consider me even more a serpent. I could not imagine facing the ignorance of my serpient friends, who would never comprehend what I had lost. But it was time. I had no place in this world if it wasn't in Wyvern's Court. On the last day we planned to spend with the guild, Betia left early in the morning to hunt with some of Obsidian's people, and I remained behind, speaking with their leader. When the White Viper pointed out that the winter solstice was only a couple of weeks away, I was reminded of how fast time was flying. We would be leaving the next day. I would be home in time for the Namirda holiday, which celebrated the birth of the Serpient people. Thinking of it made me wonder about the group I was currently with. "Tell me of your people," I said finally. "I know the stories as they have been told by my ancestors, but I would like to hear how you tell them." He hesitated, his eyes searching the skies, and then agreed. Long ago, there were 13 high priests and priestesses, known as the Dasi, who were led by Maeve. There were also 2 groups, the Naserarush and the Ealarush, who were lesser priests and priestesses. Maeve and the Dasi spoke to the gods. They brought the rain and peace and prosperity for their people. The Rush spoke to the villagers. They made sure everyone was heard and no one was forgotten. They were the healers and judges, and they taught the common people the worship of Anlay. They answered to no one and nothing but fate herself. They believed, he explained, that every soul was connected to every other, and therefore that none was better than any other. They believed that each person was a part of the whole and led and followed as fate decreed, and that the position of each person shifted as fate decreed through their life. They kept their true names between themselves and the gods, because in the wider world we are all anonymous. When we call another person by name, it is just another name for ourselves. Of course you know the story told in the Namir Da of how Maeve seduced Leben in order to protect her people, and he gave to her the second form of a white viper, and to the rest of her people the second form of serpent and falcons. He paused and finally said, "That is the entire story that the Cobriana tell. What they do not mention is that Maeve had a lover before Leben. They do not tell that part of the tale because that lover was one of the Dasi, Keisha, the high priestess of Anamirak." My eyes widened. Keisha had been the first cobra. Keisha was devastated by what she thought was Maeve's betrayal. Even after Leben was gone, she refused to forgive Maeve. Instead, she took a mate and bore to him a son she named Dient. You know the rest of that story, because Dient was the first king of your line. As for our line, our myths say that Maeve started practicing black magic, I said when the silence grew long. Anmik, the dark god who is Anamirak's opposite, grants the numb peace sought by a man or woman whose love has turned to elsewhere. He whispers promises of rest and of release from pain, and Maeve succumbed to those lures, so Keisha's people drove her away. And then? The Nasera Rush took her in. Gradually, she withdrew from Anmik's numbness, accepting life once again. She took a mate. Her descendants are the white vipers of today. We follow the ways of the Nasera Rush as well as we can. 2 generations ago, Maeve's kin were pardoned by the Cobriana, I said, broaching the subject tentatively. The Obsidian Guild was invited to join the rest of the Serpient. Only 2 white vipers came. I know your people have been treated poorly in the past, but surely the time has come when you no longer need to live like outlaws. Wyvern's Court is already struggling to bridge one ancient rift. Now is not the time to fight to close another, he pointed out. Besides, my people would only follow someone who they knew understood and respected their ways. The Cobriana have not earned that trust. The Chardet line of hawks certainly has not. I wasn't asking you to kneel to me, I said, hoping I had not given that impression. I was just offering you a place to call home. As long as you didn't break any of our laws, no one would demand obeisance. You have had ancestors who promised pardons and delivered mass extinctions. The executions, he pointed out. Others have invited us into their land only to decide after a few years that we were not respectful enough. It did not help that one of the 2 vipers who went to Serpient lands was executed shortly after. I'm inclined to believe your father's word that Adelina was guilty of treason, but my kin have learned not to be too trusting. Yet you took me in? You wear the anlay, he said, as if that was all that mattered. Maybe it was. And I might have wanted to meet the wyvern who would be queen of this impossible realm. I do not trust easily, but that does not mean I have no hope for the future. When I was a young child, your uncle used to walk these woods. Anjay Cobriana would spend nights here sometimes, when he could get away from his guards. He would dance with us, and for a while we could forget that by blood we were enemies. If he had lived, we might have followed him. But that "if" speaks of the past. Now I speak to the child of Anjay's younger brother, Oliza Chardet Cobriana, who has more pressing issues at the moment than my people. Before more could be said, Betia and the others returned. Obviously impressed, her companions informed me that Betia could gather fish from the river as if her hands were made of netting. The mute wolf smiled proudly, holding up her catch. During dinner we made light conversation that turned deeper when one of the pythons of the guild sighed. It's a pity you don't perform the Rashatoth dances, she said. I shrugged a little, though I knew it did not hide my regret. It's a decision I've made. I don't want to be pressured. That's why it's so unfair, the python interrupted. If you were 40 years old and had been performing Rashatoth since you were 16, all you would need to tell a suitor is that you weren't interested. You shouldn't be denied the dances just because you aren't ready to choose a partner. I would think a child of Obsidian wouldn't have such a passionate belief in fairness, considering how you have been treated in the past. She gave a shrug that conveyed the same things that mine had earlier: acknowledgement and regret. A dancer who cannot dance because her nestmates won't respect her desire not to choose a lover is just as confined as an avian lady who is ostracized because she chooses to have one. That isn't freedom. Perhaps it is no wonder your people have forgotten Anna Mirak's magic, if they have so obviously forgotten her lessons. Some sense of tension I got from her made me turn to Betia then. Betia's beautiful brown eyes dropped when I focused on her, but then she smiled, so I didn't understand why she stood up and walked inside. I wanted to follow her, but my companion caught my wrist. She'll be back. I think I know what she's after. She was working on it earlier. Betia returned, then placed a soft bundle that felt like silk in my hands. The material slid across my fingers, and I caught my breath as I opened it. The melos was simple. A single piece of cream-colored silk with an uncomplicated border stitched in golden thread. There were no tassels, no chimes, no fringes or complicated patterns, and I knew that it would always be my most cherished possession. "Dance," the python said. "No one here is going to tell Wyvern's Court that we saw Eliza Charday Cobriana dancing a melos. No one would believe us anyway." I pulled Betia into a hug. She knew exactly what this meant to me. She didn't have to speak it out loud. Dance. When was the last time I let myself feel joy without reserve? I couldn't recall. This would be one of those times. I stepped onto the dais. I knew the variation I would perform. Han la melos. And I knew who I would be performing it for. I looked into the wolf's eyes and heard the music begin. I felt as if I moved in a sphere of fire and electricity, and anything I touched would meet that charge. Why had I refused this feeling before? In that moment, I believed with all my soul that any trouble it might bring was more than worth it. I could survive with nothing else if I could just dance and have someone to dance for. At the end, I stepped off the dais and knew that every eye in the camp, far more than those of the 4 people who had been watching at the start, was on me. I saw only one person. I hooked the scarf across Betia's shoulders and grasped her hands as if I could channel into her this incredible feeling of possibility. Maybe I did. We both jumped when a viper, one of the 2 professional-level dancers who traveled with the Obsidian Guild, stepped toward us. For someone who has never performed publicly, you were amazing. Actually, that was amazing even if you had been dancing for years. Something to be said for crossbreeding, she said, joking. I would love to share the dais with you someday. Thank you, I said, snapping out of my trance. Betia's hand was still twined with my left one, and I gave her an apologetic smile. She shrugged off the interruption, giving me a friendly shove toward the other dancer. The serpent laughed. I think that was an order to do so now. Do you know the Sanasi? Literally, the name meant raising the gods. It was one of the most exotic of the Sakri, and Urban, Salem, and I had performed it together on more than one occasion. I know it, I answered. The viper offered her hand, inviting me to join her and her companion, a man who had amused Betia and me the past several nights with stories and songs. The Sanasi was one of the more complicated versions of the dance. I knew it well, but my ability to perform would be entirely dependent on how well I could sense and predict my partner's movements and work seamlessly with them. I didn't want to make a fool out of myself. I took the white viper's hand, then glanced at Betia, who was seated in front of the dais, watching me and waiting. She flashed a challenging smile, the glint in her eyes daring. The 3 of us must have been quite a sight, all balanced effortlessly on the balls of our feet, forearms crossed before us, facing each other in a triangle so that our fingertips just barely touched. White viper, Burmese python, and me. If only Wyvern's Court could achieve this. One little symbol, the anle my mother had given to me, had allowed me to join this mixed group. If only I could forge such a powerful talisman for my home. And we've got one more chapter left in us for this evening. Chapter 14. One of the Obsidian Guild played the flute, the simple instrument that had always been the main accompaniment to the serpents' dances. Breath attuned, heartbeats in sync, we moved into the ancient dance. There was nothing else beyond the dais. As the three of us moved, the air seemed to ripple. It was as if we were alone, two spirits in three bodies. The pressure grew, and I abruptly realized that something was wrong. 2? It should have been 3, or 1. I knew where the white viper was when I danced, but the python was a foreign entity. I wasn't the only one who stumbled. Nothing touched us, but I found myself fighting off tremors. I pushed myself up and saw the white viper kneeling by the third dancer's side. The guild's leader spoke behind me. Keisha's line hasn't demonstrated any talent with the old coven's magic since Maeve was driven away, he said, his voice holding something that sounded like awe. I didn't imagine you would be the first, Wyvern. I don't have magic, I answered. My throat was dry. What had happened? I felt much the way I had when High's power had overwhelmed me before I spoke to Morris and Prentice. Betia put a hand on my arm, questioning. I'm all right, I said softly. It was... Already the sensations were fading. I felt as if, for a moment, I had touched something incredible, but then it was gone. The white viper came to my side, her face glowing with admiration. That, she laughed. I've read descriptions, of course, that say a true Sakri is too powerful even to be recalled by the mind without practice, but I never imagined. She stopped when she saw the confused expression on my face. Sakri. These days they're just a type of dance, but once they were powerful spells. No serpent has been able to spin one since Maeve's time. And even if we could, I understand that the mind can't see them, or make sense of them without training. They fade away like dreams. That was certainly one way to describe this lingering feeling. It was as if I had woken abruptly, just as my mind had reached for sleep, and the land of dreams. Was this what High had tried to explain to me? The mind barely comprehends its own yesterday, but Sakri force it on other times, other places, other people. Visions it tries to shake away because to hold them all would only court madness. You seem much less confused by this than I am, I said, trying to make sense of what happened. A white viper is no stranger to magic. We never lost ours the way Keisha's kin did, but Maeve's position in the Dasi was as one who had preserved balance, not as one who worked the higher magics, the white viper explained patiently. Even in the early days, we never possessed the sheer power that could be woven by Keisha or Sharza. Never in all my days in Wyvern's Court would a serpent have casually said the name of the first cobra and the name of the Falcon Empress in the same breath. Hearing them together now, in this context, made me feel a little lost. On the other hand, the connection did make me remember something Nasias had said. A falcon once explained to me that their magic is disturbed by what is left of the magic the Cobriana once had. The remnants act like a spark. Maybe it does the same with yours. One of the other vipers nodded thoughtfully. That's probably all it was then. After all, it isn't often that a cobra dances with a white viper. It seems to have taken a toll on you, though. Maybe you should lie down for a few minutes. Yes, I think I will. Beatty and I returned to the tent that had been set aside for our use. I'm all right, I assured Betia, who was watching me with a worried expression. I don't think wyverns are cut out for magic. I briefly described the unpleasant incident with Hyde that had occurred while we were trying to deal with Urban. He would be walking again by now, I realized. I leaned against Betia with a sigh. I wish there was some magic that would let me know what was going on at home. Being here, dancing, almost makes me forget how scared I am of what might be happening while I'm gone, but then it all comes flooding back. The tent flap opened just enough to allow one of the Obsidian Guild vipers to slither inside. The serpent returned to human form to explain swiftly. Intruders. Lions. They look like they might be the mercenaries who have been after you. We can deal with them as long as they don't know you're here. So stay quiet for a little, all right?" We nodded, and she left the same way she had come, discreetly, in case anyone was watching the camp. It wasn't long before we heard loud voices outside. It sounded as if the Obsidian Guild was inviting the mercenaries to join them for supper. "We're looking for a pair of thieves," the Lion's leader said. "2 girls, a wolf, and a bird. One has dark hair, gold eyes, real distinctive." There were some questioning murmurs as the Obsidian Guild consulted its own people. "No thieves here," someone answered. I had to bite my hand to keep from laughing. The Obsidian Guild, while friendly to a traveling dancer, was generally considered a group of outlaws. "You sure? Mind if we look around?" I held my breath until I heard an indignant, "Yes, we mind. We offer you hospitality, and you offer mistrust in return. Sit." It wasn't an invitation. "Maybe if you join us for a spell, we might be more inclined to believe you're friendly, especially if you have something to trade for the information." The mercenaries mumbled an apology. I gathered that they agreed to join the guild for a meal. "I know you aren't looking for thieves," I heard someone say a bit later. "You're mercenaries. You've passed through here before. Who are you working for now?" "Can't tell you that," one of the lions answered gruffly. "Honestly, you must know," the serpent said, pushing. "I know. My men do not," the leader said before anyone else could speak. "And it is not information I am at liberty to give out, no matter how grateful I am for your hospitality." There was an odd hesitation in his response, as if he was having trouble speaking. "Someone must want these 2 pretty badly," a serpent observed. "Yes," was the only reply. A while later, everything was quiet. Beatty and I waited until our host stepped into the hut with a smirk and a chuckle. "I hate rude people." "Where?" "Drugged," he answered simply, "sleeping off some of their own poisons, from their own bags, which my people have lightened just a little. There's no reference in the leader's bags about who hired him, but we did find this. I believe it's yours." He held out a sheathed dagger that I instantly recognized as one my mother had passed on to me. It had been given to her on the day the last avian-serpent battle had been fought, and it had never once been drawn. She had handed it to me with a prayer. "I hope you need it as often as I have." "It is." I tied the dagger to my belt to keep it safe. Why would the lions have had it? He quirked one eyebrow and admitted, "Probably for the same reason that one of my people took it. It's very well made, a work of art in addition to being a weapon, and therefore valuable. If the lions found it while they were looking for you, I imagine they didn't hesitate in taking it, and they're going to be cross when they wake up and find it's gone. We can defend ourselves without any problem, but I would rather you and Betia weren't caught in the middle of it. I think it's time the 2 of you moved on." It had been one of the most amazing days of my life. I had the melos that Betia had given me tied at my waist, and all I needed to do was touch it to break out in a grin. But all good things must end. I had another life to return to, one with responsibilities and expectations. I reached for Betia's hand as I stepped out of the hut, and tried to remember the optimism and faith that she had brought out in me. "Thank you for everything," I said to the members of the Obsidian Guild. Our host shook his head. "Our hospitality was nothing more than the unlay should ensure you anywhere. Though if gratitude will keep you from speaking to your parents of us—" I nodded. If you wish to be unknown, it would be a poor reward for me to go against that wish. "I'll send a couple of my people with you, to guide you until you meet up with the Vahamil. They should be able to take you the rest of the way to Wyvern's Court." "Teska, thank you." The leader of the Obsidian Guild smiled. "Ale anle itil. If ever I would acknowledge a queen, perhaps it would be you. But that time isn't here yet. Wimashe. Wimashle lain toth. Goodbye, friend." And with that, we're going to call our read to a close for the evening. Thank you all so much for joining me this evening and letting me read to you. I hope you have enjoyed the festive accoutrement that I have put on for you guys this evening. And as a reminder, speaking of which, we will not be reading this coming Monday, as this coming Monday is, of course, Christmas Day. So we will be resuming, though, the next Monday. So I guess the first of the year. Oh, you managed to stay awake. Good job, Miss Deborah. I'm glad you were able to stay awake for this reading. So with that, I am so incredibly grateful for you all being here with me and listening to me read. And this year has been an interesting one. We've done some learning and growing, and I'm hoping to get it started again for this coming year with fresh vigor. So we're going to be finishing up this book. It's probably going to take us another maybe 3 reads to get through the rest of the book, perhaps. And then we'll be finishing up with the final book of this series, which is Wyvernhale, I believe, is the name of the book. But once we're about halfway through with that one, if you guys have any suggestions about books or series that you would like me to investigate, any personal favorites of yours, please hit me up in my DMs and let me know, so that way I can start looking and reading and adding to our list for the coming year of books to read. I mean, I have a massive library at my house, tons of books that I still have yet to read, but if there's anything in particular that I notice that starting to become a pattern, if you guys are mentioning anything kind of sort of all together that you would like for me to read, by all means, let me know what it is, and I will start investigating those books, and we'll see what we come up with. So, with that being said, love to hear you read. Oh, absolutely! I would love to. Of course, I would be more than happy to read poetry for you guys. So if you have anything in particular that you would like for me to read at some point when we're done, again, I'd like for us to get done with our book series first, just to kind of round it out and bring it to a close. But by all means, please, Tired and Wired, please let me know. Send me a message if you have something published. I'd be more than happy to check it out and perhaps bring it on here and read for you guys. And like that in general. If there's anything else also, if you have any published works yourself that you would like for me to start reading, please let me know, and I'll be more than happy to start looking that stuff up. So I hope you guys have a fantastic night, a great week, and if you celebrate Christmas, I hope you have a wonderful Christmas and a happy New Year, because I will be seeing you on the first day of the brand new year. So with that being said, I hope you guys have a wonderful evening, stay hydrated, and I love you guys. Bye.